I'm JJ Gradoni, owner and operator of Gradoni & Associates, a private investigative firm that has been in business here in Houston for 35 years. As I mentioned in our introductory video, when I left police work, I decided to open a private investigative company. And that was a great idea, except I didn't have any clients. So I went back to one of my strengths, which is when I was a policeman. I worked fugitives, and I ran down people wanted on warrants and put them in jail. So I negotiated with some bonding companies to locate people that had forfeited bond, place them back in custody, and for that, you got a percentage of the bond. So it was one of those deals where if you catch the guy, you get paid. If you don't get paid, but you have a great experience. So what happens when someone is on bond, they don't come to court, then the judge revokes their bond, which means that the bonding company has a period of time to get that person back into custody, or they have to pay the bond amount. Usually they only collect about 10%, so paying the entire bond amount is a great loss. And at the time, when I embarked on this journey, I thought, okay, when I was a policeman and I went to arrest somebody, if they said they didn't want to go, I could use whatever force necessary to effect the arrest. I wasn't sure how that would work if I was a civilian without a gun, and I said, you have to come with me because I'm going to take you to jail, and they said, I don't want to go. So I would hire one of my buddies who was a policeman to go with me. That way, when we found the suspect or the defendant and he didn't want to go, my buddy could use whatever force necessary to take him into custody. So in the beginning, I had a case where the guy had left town and then come back on a $10,000 bond. It was for burglary of a habitation. My reward would have been $1,000 if I caught him. I found an address where I thought he was at. I had his picture. We went and we knocked on the door. Lo and behold, he answered the door. And I said, Mr. Jones, you forfeited your bond. We have a warrant for your arrest. You have to come with us to, take care of business. Mr. Jones looks at me with a straight face and says, that's not me. I said, what do you mean it's not you? I have your picture. He said, that's my twin brother. I thought, oh my God, does he have a twin brother? Now I knew if I arrested him and brought him in and he was the wrong guy, I would have to fade a lot of heat. I also thought if I left and he was the right guy, he wasn't going to be here when I came back. So I thought, how am I going to solve this? Well, Mr. Jones didn't look like he was the sharpest knife on the block. So I asked him if he would hold up his thumb. And I had him hold up his thumb like this. And I looked at it. And I said, you have a right-left signature thumb. And I looked at your fingerprints before I came out here, and I think you're him. And he looked at me like, is this guy for real? And I said, so I think it would be a really good idea for you to admit who you are, and that way you won't be facing another charge of giving a false identity to a police officer. He thought for a minute, and he said, yeah, it's me. Now I was very relieved because now I was going to get my $1,000 reward. So we got in the car, and I just couldn't wait. I had to ask him. I said, do you have a twin brother? And he said, no. And I said, and then he said, can you really identify fingerprints? And I said, no. And away we went. A second story I have regarding a bond forfeiture I think is real interesting. There was a gentleman that was on bond for getting caught with a load of cocaine here in town, and he had posted a $200,000 bond, which of course he missed his first court setting. He was from the Valley and Hispanic, and probably cartel related. Now the bond company was out 200 grand if he wasn't back in custody. So they offered me an opportunity to find him. Now this would mean $20,000 commission for me. I was on the hunt. I called a friend of mine who was at food stamps, and we ran his girlfriend, and lo and behold, she was getting food stamps in Brownsville, Texas. I figured he's got to be with her. So what I was worried about was getting him into custody. I didn't want to call Brownsville PD and have that all messed up. I wanted to get the collar myself. Now, it's a little known fact that in an arrest warrant says you are hereby commanded to arrest the body of. A judge can name you the person to arrest him. I went before Judge Brian Raines, who I knew as a cop when he was a prosecutor and a judge, and he put the warrant in my name. I then went to the warrant division at the sheriff's department, and the major that was the head of the division was very upset that I had done that. And he told me, okay, well, if you catch this guy, don't call us to come get him. I said, all right. So I made arrangements with my client to go down to Brownsville and hopefully apprehend him. And my client said, don't worry, I have a friend who has an airplane. You catch this guy, we'll fly down, we'll pick you up, and we'll bring you back. Wow, okay. So I had called, a friend of mine had called down there and put me in touch with a Texas Ranger. And he was going to help me find the guy. I thought, okay, this looks good. So before I went to the DPS office, I drove to the location, and there the guy was. He was sitting on the steps of the apartment reading the newspaper. I thought, should I grab this guy now? Nah, better not. I could mess this up. Maybe he's got a gun. So I went and I got the trooper. And I figured I was going to have a Texas Ranger with me. A tall white guy in a hat with a big gun. But the Texas Ranger was a short Hispanic male with a big gun. So we drove over to the apartment complex, and just as we got there, the guy got in a car with a female and they drove off. We followed them to a Kmart parking lot, and when they got out of the car, we approached them and said, you know, sir, we have a warrant for your arrest. You jump on, and same old story, it's not me. Showed him the picture, said, yeah, it's you. The Ranger cuffed him. The girlfriend spit in the Ranger's face. I thought, this is going to be fun. So he called Brownsville PD. She got arrested. This guy's screaming and yelling, it's not me. Down we go to Brownsville PD. Now we have to call the warrant division at Harris County and get his fingerprints. And I wasn't really excited about that because they were not real happy with me having a warrant in my name. So while we were waiting for that, one of the Brownsville detectives is sitting in the room with this guy showing him homicide pictures. And the guy's sitting there crying. And I walked in and I said, what's going on? He said, I know this guy. I worked the case where his family members got killed over a dope deal. And I showed him the pictures of his dead family members, and he started crying and he admitted who he was. Wow. Okay. So now we take him to the Cameron County Jail and book him. But now I have to get him back to Houston. So the next morning I take him before a magistrate to get his warning. I put him in my rental car and I drive to this airport. And there at the airport is this tiny little plane with these two propellers. And I went, oh. And the guy says to me, he spoke perfect English, I'm not getting in that plane. And I said, well, I don't really want to get in a plane either, but you're worth 20 grand to me, so one way or the other, you're getting in that plane. And he said, I'm not getting in the plane. So I took off his seatbelt and had a conversation with him in which he agreed to get back in the plane with me. So here we are, we're in this plane, and I was scared to death. And I was thinking, 20 grand. This guy's worth 20 grand. It's okay. So we get down to Houston and we land, thank God. And I have one of my associates, he picks us up at the airport. I called the bonding company and said, okay, I got him. And here's the deal. I'm going to stop by your office before I book him and you're going to hand me a check for 20 grand. They said, oh, you want the check now? I said, yeah, because I knew if I booked him and there was a possibility they never paid me. So down we go, stop at the bonding company, pick up my check, bring the guy and book him. And that was the biggest bond forfeiture that I ever had. And it paid my bills for quite a while. See you next time we have a story. Thank you.